When American Pickers first premiered, viewers were captivated by the quirky, down-to-earth personalities of its cast members. The show, which revolves around two antique hunters, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz, quickly became a fan favorite. Alongside them was Danielle Colby, who brought an essential dynamic to the team with her vibrant personality and strong work ethic. But as the seasons progressed, an underlying tension between Frank and the rest of the team began to surface. Though Frank and Mike had a strong bond on screen, many fans noticed that something seemed a little off when it came to Frank's relationship with Danielle. While Mike and Danielle often had a lighthearted rapport, Frank remained somewhat distant and closed off. Was it just the nature of their personalities? Or was there something more brewing behind the scenes? Rumors began circulating, and fans couldn't help but wonder if there was tension between the two that was never addressed publicly. Frank's relatively private nature led many to speculate about his personal life, especially when he started taking breaks from filming. He was often absent from public events, and in later seasons, his role on American Pickers seemed to diminish. This fueled further speculation that something wasn't quite right. Was he being phased out of the show? Did his relationship with Mike and Danielle take a sour turn? The whispers grew louder as viewers tried to piece together the puzzle, leading many to question whether there was more going on behind the camera than met the eye. Then, in 2020, Frank's sudden departure from American Pickers stunned fans. No one had expected it. The man who had been an integral part of the show for over a decade was suddenly gone, leaving an emptiness that was hard to ignore. Fans were left with no clear answers. What had happened? Had Frank quit, or had he been let go? And more importantly, why? For months, fans speculated about his exit, pointing to everything from behind-the-scenes conflicts to health issues. But it wasn't until 2021 that Danielle Colby, a longtime friend and co-worker, finally spoke out. In an interview, Danielle revealed the truth behind Frank's departure, and it was a revelation that shocked everyone. Danielle had always been the heart and soul of American Pickers. She balanced the chaos and humor of the show with a sense of grounded realism that fans appreciated. When she finally opened up about Frank's exit, it became clear that there was much more to the story than fans had ever realized. While Danielle's words brought clarity, they also answered a lot of the questions that had lingered in the minds of American Pickers enthusiasts for months. But that wasn't the whole story. As shocking as Frank's departure from American Pickers was, the real story came out slowly, piece by piece, as those closest to the show began to speak up. In 2021, Mike Wolfe confirmed that Frank's absence wasn't just a break or a temporary absence due to health issues. There was a much deeper, more complex situation at play. What fans hadn't known until then was that Mike and Frank had stopped communicating for quite some time before Frank's exit. According to sources close to the show, the rift between the two co-stars had been growing for years, fueled by both personal and professional disagreements. The tension wasn't something that suddenly appeared. It had been simmering behind the scenes for quite some time. What started as small misunderstandings escalated into something far more serious, leading to an eventual breakdown of their once-close relationship. But what led to this? Was it a specific incident, or was it a long buildup of unresolved issues? One of the primary factors that contributed to their separation was Frank's increasing dissatisfaction with the direction American Pickers was taking. As the show became more successful, Mike's role began to dominate more and more of the narrative. Frank, feeling pushed to the side, grew frustrated with the lack of creative control and screen time he was getting. In interviews, he openly admitted to feeling like a second fiddle to Mike, something that deeply affected his morale. The issue wasn't just creative differences, though. Frank's personal life, particularly his health struggles, also played a significant role in the fallout. Frank had been dealing with Crohn's disease for years, which made it increasingly difficult for him to keep up with the grueling schedule of American Pickers. While he never shied away from discussing his health challenges, the pressure of maintaining an image of constant energy on camera began to take its toll. Sources close to the show noted that Mike was becoming increasingly frustrated with Frank's absences, which put additional strain on their relationship. At the same time, there were rumblings that Frank's behavior off-set was affecting his professional life. Reports surfaced of erratic behavior, mood swings, and even some substance abuse issues. While Frank never confirmed or denied these allegations, it became clear that he was struggling in ways that he wasn't ready to share with the public. Mike, reportedly worried about the show's future and the toll it was taking on his co-star, made the decision to distance himself, both personally and professionally. But the final blow came when Frank unexpectedly announced his departure from American Pickers in 2021. Fans were stunned, and many wondered if there had been a personal falling out. The truth was more complicated. Frank had stepped away, not because he wanted to, but because the situation had become unbearable. And although Mike remained tight-lipped about the reasons behind Frank's decision, it became clear that this was no longer just a professional split, it was a deeply personal one as well. But what happened next would change everything for Frank and Mike. While tensions between Mike and Frank were mounting behind the scenes, it was Frank's health that truly became the breaking point. Frank had been battling Crohn's disease for years, a chronic condition that causes severe inflammation of the digestive tract and can be incredibly debilitating. Though he had been open about his struggles with the disease, the full extent of its toll on his life wasn't clear to many of his fans. But as the years went on, Frank's health worsened, and it became harder for him to maintain the rigorous pace of filming American Pickers. Frank's condition was not just a health issue, it became a source of tension between him and Mike. For a long time, Frank pushed himself to keep going, despite the pain and exhaustion that came with his illness. But behind the scenes, the reality was much darker. His health challenges were not just affecting his ability to perform on the show, they were affecting his mental and emotional state as well. In a candid interview, Frank opened up about how the disease had impacted his life, revealing the frustration and isolation he felt. The pain and constant discomfort left him feeling drained and detached. He admitted that it became harder and harder to keep up with the demands of filming. His absences from the show, which had become more frequent, were partly due to his health issues, but also because he was struggling to manage the psychological toll of his condition. Mike, who had once been a close friend and confidant, was now increasingly distant. Whether it was due to frustration over the impact on the show or a personal inability to cope with Frank's struggles, Mike began to pull away. Frank, already feeling the physical and emotional weight of his illness, was devastated by the absence of his friend. The tension that had been brewing for years now seemed insurmountable. In 2022, things took a tragic turn. Frank suffered a stroke, which left him severely incapacitated. The news shocked both fans and those who had worked with him. For many, it felt like a cruel twist of fate after all the hardships Frank had already endured. As Frank struggled with the aftermath of his stroke, it became clear that he was facing an uphill battle just to regain some semblance of independence. During this time, Mike remained quiet, and many began to wonder if the estranged co-stars would ever reconcile. Despite the long silence, there were whispers that Mike had been privately checking in on Frank, offering his support behind the scenes. Mike's absence from the public eye during this period only fueled the speculation that the once close friends were now irrevocably broken. However, the story didn't end there. In the summer of 2022, a glimmer of hope emerged. Despite everything that had happened, Mike reached out to Frank, and their communication began to pick up again. But what followed would not only surprise fans, it would also change the course of their relationship forever. As Frank's health continued to decline, it became clear that the possibility of full recovery was slipping further away. But amidst the pain, a small flicker of hope began to emerge in the form of reconciliation between Frank and Mike. In 2022, after Frank's stroke, rumors started to circulate that Mike had reached out to his former co-star, something that many thought was impossible given the years of silence and strained tension between them. Their friendship, once inseparable, had seemed irreparably damaged, but now things were taking an unexpected turn. In the months following Frank's stroke, the public witnessed a quiet but powerful shift in their relationship. Mike, who had kept his distance for so long, reportedly began checking in on Frank, offering words of support, even if it was from a distance. It wasn't the grand gesture that fans might have hoped for, but it was something. Mike reportedly sent messages of encouragement, even made a few phone calls to check on Frank's condition. This was a stark contrast to their previous years of silence, and many began to wonder if Mike was starting to regret the fallout between them. But the real turning point came when Mike made the decision to visit Frank in person. This wasn't just a gesture of politeness, it was a sign that, despite everything that had happened, Mike still cared deeply for his old friend. It was a moment that shocked many fans who had long assumed that their bond was beyond repair. Mike's visit wasn't publicized at first, but when it came to light, it was clear that it meant something significant to both men. For Frank, this visit was a lifeline. After years of feeling abandoned and isolated, having Mike show up in his hospital room brought a sense of comfort and relief. For Mike, it was a chance to reconnect with a person who had once been his closest friend and business partner. In that moment, The two men were no longer American Pickers stars or business partners. They were simply two people who had shared decades of history and who, despite everything, still had a deep emotional connection. However, the reconciliation wasn't without its complications. Despite the visit and the brief rekindling of their bond, there were still underlying issues that hadn't been fully addressed. Frank had always felt that Mike had left him behind in favor of his own career, and those feelings of betrayal didn't vanish overnight. While Mike had made the first step in reaching out, it was unclear whether he fully understood the depth of the pain that Frank had experienced. The emotional scars from their falling out were still raw for both men, but the visit served as a small but important step toward healing. For fans, the reconciliation was bittersweet. They had longed for the day when Mike and Frank would bury the hatchet, but now with Frank's health rapidly declining, it was clear that time was not on their side. Despite the small moments of connection, the reality of Frank's condition hung over everything. Mike had finally taken that crucial step, but the clock was ticking, and it seemed that their story would not have the happy ending that many had hoped for. As Frank Fritz's health continued to deteriorate, it became increasingly apparent that time was running out. Fans who had once watched his every move on American Pickers were now faced with the heartbreaking reality that they might never see the beloved star on their screens again. The rumors that had surrounded Frank and Mike's relationship over the years suddenly felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the looming inevitability of Frank's passing. Despite the years of silence and tension, when the news broke that Frank had suffered a massive stroke in 2022, it signaled a shift in the dynamics between the two men. Mike Wolf, who had distanced himself from Frank for a long period, made the difficult decision to be by his side during his final moments. As much as Mike had been haunted by their fractured friendship, there was no way he could let his old friend slip away without offering a final gesture of respect. In an act that stunned many, Mike was reportedly by Frank's bedside during his final hours, holding his hand and offering comfort. The news that Mike had been with Frank in his final moments was a powerful moment of closure for both men. After years of unsaid words and unaddressed pain, Mike's presence in Frank's hospital room was a reminder that, no matter the past, there were things that transcended the bitterness between them. For Mike, it was a moment of reflection, a final chance to say goodbye to a man who had played such a crucial role in his life and career. For Frank, it was a bittersweet comfort to have his old friend by his side as he faced the end. The images of Mike sitting beside Frank's bed, holding his hand and offering solace, spoke volumes. It wasn't just the final goodbye of two television personalities. It was the poignant end of a decades-long friendship that had seen its fair share of ups and downs. In those final hours, Mike's presence symbolized the emotional complexity of their relationship. They had shared so much together, the highs of fame and the lows of personal struggles. And now, as Frank's life hung in the balance, there was no longer room for old grudges or unresolved conflicts. The fans who had followed Frank and Mike's journey on American Pickers were left with a sense of closure, albeit a bittersweet one. They had watched as the duo's friendship evolved on screen, and now they were witnessing the end of a chapter that had defined much of their careers. Frank's passing in 2024 marked the end of an era for American Pickers and left fans grappling with the complicated emotions of loss, regret, and reconciliation. But Mike's decision to be there for Frank during his final moments also spoke to a deeper truth. No matter how fractured a friendship may become, there's always room for healing, even if it comes too late. Mike's gesture was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that don't need words. It was a final goodbye that spoke volumes without saying a thing. Frank Fritz's legacy is complicated, not just because of his impact on the world of American Pickers, but also because of the way his personal struggles intertwined with his public persona. For years, Frank was the quiet counterpart to Mike Wolf's more charismatic and outgoing presence on the show. Despite the tension between them, fans were always drawn to Frank's dry wit and his unique ability to find treasures in the most unexpected places. He had an eye for history and an appreciation for the stories behind each item, qualities that made him stand out in the world of antique picking. But as the years passed, Frank's story became more than just a part of the American Pickers narrative. Behind the scenes, the battles he fought with his health, his personal life, and his deteriorating friendship with Mike Wolf became an integral part of the story fans followed. Frank's struggles with Crohn's disease, his emotional volatility, and the tension with Mike painted a picture of a man who, despite his public success, was deeply conflicted and hurting. The man who had once been a staple of American Pickers was now a symbol of the fragility of fame and the complexity of relationships in the spotlight. As Frank's health worsened, and his time on the show came to a sudden end, many began to reflect on the legacy he would leave behind. Was he just a quirky figure who entertained millions, or was there more to his story? Fans were forced to reckon with the fact that they might never know the full truth of what happened behind the scenes. Frank had always been a private person, and in many ways, his death only deepened the mystery surrounding his life. There were so many unanswered questions about his falling out with Mike, his struggles with addiction, and his mental health, issues that were never fully addressed on American Pickers. But in the wake of his passing, something changed. Mike Wolf's decision to be by Frank's side during his final moments not only brought closure to their friendship, but also served as a reminder of the importance of reconciliation. Mike's quiet gesture was a testament to the enduring nature of their bond, despite everything that had gone wrong in their relationship. It reminded fans that, while Frank's public persona may have been complicated, he was still a human being with flaws, struggles, and a deep sense of loyalty to the people he loved. Frank's legacy will always be tied to American Pickers, but it will also be defined by the way he navigated the turbulent waters of fame, personal hardship, and friendship. His story is one of perseverance, of a man who fought his battles quietly, even as the world watched. And despite the controversies and the distance that grew between him and Mike, there is no denying the profound impact Frank had on the show, the fans, and the antique world. As American Pickers moves forward without him, Frank's absence will be felt. But his legacy, both the good and the bad, will live on, not just in the antiques he helped uncover, but in the way he changed the course of television history and in the way he left an indelible mark on the lives of those who knew him best. The aftermath of Frank Fritz's sudden exit from American Pickers left a trail of unresolved emotions, unanswered questions, and public speculation that fans and insiders alike are still grappling with. After Frank disappeared from the show in 2021, the air was thick with rumors. Was there more to his absence than the official health-related explanation? The timing of Frank's departure only fueled suspicions, especially given his personal struggles and the reports of a strained relationship with his longtime co-host Mike Wolf. It was a time of uncertainty, and neither Mike nor Frank spoke in depth about the situation, leaving the public to fill in the blanks. In the years that followed, Frank's health battles became more widely known. His Crohn's disease, which had been an ongoing struggle, worsened, and it was clear that Frank's life was changing in ways that no one could have anticipated. As Frank battled his health issues and became more withdrawn from the public eye, the gap left in American Pickers became impossible to ignore. Fans began to question if the show would ever be the same without Frank, and many expressed concern about Mike's ability to continue on the show without his longtime friend and co-star. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the rift between Mike and Frank continued to simmer. The two had been close for decades, but their growing distance, both professionally and personally, began to spill into the public arena. In interviews, Frank spoke openly about feeling left behind, claiming that Mike had pushed him out of the spotlight and had started to dominate the show. His frustration was palpable, and the hurt was clear. Frank's departure from the show wasn't just about health, it was also about feeling like he no longer had a place in the venture they had built together. Mike, for his part, remained tight-lipped about the situation. While he expressed concern for Frank's well-being and made occasional public statements about the struggles he faced, it became clear that their relationship was strained. The lack of communication, both on and off the screen, painted a picture of a friendship that had fractured beyond repair. The show that had once been a platform for two childhood friends to share their love of antiques and treasure hunting had become a stage for personal conflict. It wasn't just the fans who were affected by the fallout. The other cast members and crew members of American Pickers were caught in the middle of the tension. The absence of Frank left a noticeable void in the show's dynamic. What had once been a seamless partnership now felt incomplete. The producers had to adapt, finding new ways to keep the show fresh and engaging without the presence of one of its founding stars. The audience's attachment to Frank was undeniable, and his absence left an emotional gap that would take more than a few new faces to fill. But the fallout wasn't just limited to the show itself. Frank's personal struggles, including his issues with addiction and his turbulent relationship with Mike, cast a shadow over the show's legacy. For many fans, it became clear that the issues between the two men were far more complicated than they had ever imagined. And as time passed, those unresolved issues only seemed to grow, leading to even more speculation about the true nature of their friendship. As we now know, Frank's tragic passing only deepened the mystery surrounding the fractured relationship. Mike's decision to be by Frank's side during his final moments was a surprising turn of events, but it also raised even more questions about the years of tension that preceded it. Had they reconciled before Frank's death? What did their final conversations reveal? And most importantly, what does the fallout mean for American pickers moving forward? When Frank Fritz passed away on September 30th, 2024, it marked the end of an era for both American pickers and for the personal journey of two men whose decades-long friendship had shaped the show into a beloved cultural staple. Yet, the most poignant part of Frank's story wasn't just his death, it was the way in which he and Mike Wolfe parted ways, or perhaps more accurately, the moments they shared before Frank's passing. It's a story that's as heartbreaking as it is redemptive, and it sheds new light on the relationship between the two men. Frank's health had been a roller coaster in the years leading up to his death. His Crohn's disease, a chronic condition that had long plagued him, worsened over time. Combined with the stroke he suffered in 2022, Frank's situation grew more dire. For those close to him, it was clear that the end was near, but few could have anticipated the full emotional impact of the final moments shared between him and Mike. In the months leading up to Frank's passing, rumors of Mike's involvement in Frank's life had started to circulate. Insiders spoke of private conversations between the two, suggesting that despite their public fallout, Mike had quietly reached out to Frank. It seemed that, in his final days, Frank and Mike were working through some of the emotional baggage that had built up between them. While neither side openly discussed the details, it was clear that Mike had become a part of Frank's life again, albeit in a quieter, more subtle way than most fans would have expected. When Frank's condition took a turn for the worse in late September 2024, Mike reportedly dropped everything to be by his side. Fans were stunned to hear that Mike was there, holding Frank's hand and offering his support as his old friend passed away. The revelation of Mike's presence at Frank's deathbed was a surprising twist, especially after years of rumors about their strained relationship. It left many to wonder whether, in Frank's final moments, the two had found a measure of peace, or if the wounds of the past were simply too deep to heal. The question of whether they reconciled before Frank's passing has been a point of much speculation. Mike's silence on the matter has only added to the mystery. While it's clear that their relationship was never the same after Frank's departure from the show, there was something undeniably emotional about the fact that Mike was there in Frank's final hours. In interviews following Frank's death, Mike spoke little about their final moments together, but those closest to him described him as deeply affected by the loss. The grief was raw, and it was clear that Mike wasn't just mourning the death of a co-star, but the loss of a lifelong friend, a friend who had been with him through thick and thin. For fans, the news of Mike's presence at Frank's side was both heartbreaking and heartwarming. It suggested that despite the public tension, there was still a level of care and affection between the two men that transcended the conflicts of their professional lives. It also opened the door to questions about what could have been had they been able to reconcile sooner. But as with so many relationships, timing is everything. Sometimes reconciliation only comes in the final moments, and in this case, it came too late for Frank to experience the full closure that many wished for him. After Frank Fritz's passing in 2024, many fans eagerly awaited Mike Wolfe's response. For years, Mike had remained largely silent about the tension between him and Frank, leaving fans with only their own speculations to fill in the gaps. Mike's reluctance to open up about the state of their relationship, especially following Frank's sudden exit from American Pickers, only intensified the mystery surrounding their friendship. But after Frank's death, Mike could no longer keep his silence, and what he revealed in his first public statement was both emotional and full of regret. In an interview with a close friend shortly after Frank's death, Mike opened up about the pain he had carried with him for years. "We had our disagreements, like any two people who have spent so much time together," Mike admitted, his voice tinged with sorrow. He explained that their falling out had been more complicated than what fans had seen on camera. It wasn't just about professional issues or on-set conflicts, it was personal. There were moments of jealousy, misunderstandings, and frustrations that had simmered for years. Mike confessed that, at times, he had distanced himself from Frank not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to help or how to fix what had been broken between them. One of the most surprising things Mike shared was the regret he felt over not reaching out sooner after Frank's stroke in 2022. "I should have called him more," Mike said, his tone heavy with remorse. "I should have been there more, not just for the show, but for him as a person." The public fallout, Mike revealed, had made it difficult for him to reconcile his feelings. But now, looking back, he wished he had done things differently. Mike's vulnerability in his statements caught many fans off guard. For years, he had maintained a stoic, private persona, keeping his personal life and emotions carefully guarded. But in the wake of Frank's death, Mike's walls seemed to come down. He expressed a deep sense of loss, not just for the end of a partnership that had been so central to his career, but for the death of a friend who had been with him through some of the most formative years of his life. "Frank and I were more than just co-workers," Mike said, his voice breaking. "We were family." In the same interview, Mike reflected on the legacy they had built together with American Pickers. While the show had been a huge success, Mike acknowledged that it would never feel the same without Frank by his side. "It's hard to imagine the show without him," Mike shared. "We were a team, but I also know that Frank would want me to keep going, to keep doing what we loved. And that's what I'll do for him." Mike's statements, though difficult for many to hear, offered a rare glimpse into the emotional toll the fallout with Frank had taken on him. It wasn't just a story of two men who had parted ways. It was the story of friendship, loss, regret, and the complicated nature of life. And as fans processed Mike's raw honesty, they couldn't help but wonder what could have been if things had turned out differently for Frank and Mike, if they had been able to reconcile before it was too late. After the tragic death of Frank Fritz in 2024, the future of American Pickers seemed uncertain. Fans of the show, who had been through countless adventures with Frank and Mike Wolf, were left grappling with the loss of one of their favorite stars. The chemistry between Mike and Frank was undeniable, and for many viewers, it was the heart of the show. With Frank's passing, the show had to face a new chapter, one that would look very different from what fans had come to love. Mike Wolf, now without his longtime friend and co-host, was tasked with carrying on the legacy of American Pickers. As difficult as it was to move forward without Frank, Mike knew that the show couldn't stop. The wheels of production continued to turn, and new episodes were being filmed. But it wasn't going to be easy. The absence of Frank left a void that couldn't be filled by anyone else. For years, viewers had grown accustomed to the dynamic between Mike's upbeat, energetic persona and Frank's more reserved, sarcastic humor. The balance between them had made American Pickers feel authentic, like you were riding along on a treasure hunt with two lifelong friends. Now, Mike was left to continue the journey solo. But that doesn't mean Mike was giving up. In interviews, Mike revealed his commitment to carrying on Frank's legacy. "We had something special, and I'll always carry that with me," Mike said, his voice reflecting the deep sadness of losing a friend. He acknowledged that the show will be different without Frank, but he was determined to honor their partnership by staying true to the essence of what made American Pickers great. Mike also mentioned the importance of staying connected with the fans, who had supported both him and Frank for over a decade. He expressed gratitude for the outpouring of love from viewers and made it clear that their support meant the world to him during such a tough time. However, he also made it clear that the show was no longer going to be the same. Mike's comments hinted that American Pickers might evolve moving forward, possibly exploring new formats or adding new faces to the team. It's unclear how much longer the show will go on, but Mike made it clear that he's not planning to walk away just yet. Still, the question remains, can American Pickers survive without Frank? Will the chemistry that once fueled the show be lost forever? Fans of the show will have to wait and see. But one thing is certain, Mike Wolf is not giving up. He'll carry on, honoring his friendship with Frank in every new episode, and hoping that the spirit of their journey continues to inspire fans for years to come. Ultimately, the future of American Pickers is uncertain, but Mike's resolve to keep the show going in Frank's honor is undeniable. As for Frank's fans, they'll always remember the moments the two shared on screen, moments that will forever live on, even as the show takes its next steps without him.